You're listening to Coffee and Culture. We're on Talk 1260 and 103.7 KTRC, streaming at santafe.com. The show's on just after 2 p.m. on Saturdays and repeats on Sundays. I'm your host every other week, and my name is Matthew Chase Daniel. And today we're talking about and with a small group of artists who are part of the Santa Fe Studio Tour, which is coming up soon. And the group is called We Five, and it's Paula Roland, Gina Telcocci, Linda Ingraham, Diane Rolnick, and Robert Wilhelm. And today I'm sitting here in my living room with Paula Roland, Gina Telcocci, and Linda Ingraham to talk about the show and the studio tour and their work and why you should get out of your house and drive around and go see some artwork. So the studio tour has been going on for a while now, and there's lots and lots of artists. And I haven't myself gone through all of it in years, but I do notice driving around that there's studio tour here and studio tour there, and it's sort of a great, I have gone to studio tours like in Dixon, and it's always a great way both to see artwork and to get a sense of the community of artists in a place. How their homes look, how their studios look, a personal introduction to the work. And I find studio tours really nice for that. So thank you for being a part of that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
All of your work, we were talking before we start a little bit, has to do with nature. And I'd say that's sort of, maybe that's true. It's true of a lot more work than your work, but Gina, your work, for example, is made from natural materials as well as manufactured. So there's willows, but then there's also wire. And you're using the two, in my familiarity with it, sort of interchangeably. It's not like you're treating the wire like willow and you're treating the willow like wire, and you're making these sort of biomorphic natural forms using willow, wire, plaster, found objects, and you're harvesting a lot of that material yourself. So there's a connection with the natural world as you're making it. So talk a little bit about.
Well, of course, we all love nature, and it's big here in Santa Fe, and I have a little property out in the country where I grow willow, or willow grows by itself. So I use a lot of that, and I just find it, a source of continuous inspiration like everybody else in Santa Fe. But yeah, and I guess I love the textures and the colors and the variety of materials that I find in nature. And I like a material that fights back a little bit. I think that's what I enjoy about willow and a lot of basketry.
That it's the sort of supple nature of it, that it's resilient and you cut it and it grows back, or you could bend it. And
well, that too, but the bending and manipulating it into a form.
Yeah.
For instance, clay, which is certainly a natural material, drives me crazy. It's because it's just too malleable.
It doesn't have its own, it's not saying something itself. You have to say what you want to say.
It's not very insistent. You can sort of do anything with it.
Yeah. Willow, you can peel it or not peel it. Mm-hmm. So there's the color of the bark, which is probably different at different times of year.
Always. Always different, and so beautiful. And of course it changes, and also those, most of those materials do decay eventually, so they're not, pristine, archivally perfect materials in a sculpture. But I guess I like the fleeting nature of a lot of it too.
Yeah, that it's ephemeral work in a way.
And that it reminds us that nothing is really permanent and that everything changes. And I think the erosion around here has always been a big influence. Walking arroyos, and you see the roots that are exposed, and the landscape changes so quickly, I think.
Yeah. Where'd you come from? You've been here on and off for decades, but before that you were...
Oh, I was born in Oklahoma City,
Uh-huh.
and my family used to come here on vacation when I was a kid.
So the landscape here is part of bedded deep in your soul.
Yes, I feel that way.
Yeah. Well, you can tell it in the work. It's comes from the landscape. It's part of the landscape. I like that a lot.
Oh, good. I like that.
And Paula, your work, there's a mark making in there that feels very out of the natural world. Some of the work, those black and white pieces that we were looking at before, are almost like grasses, and they almost feel like imprints of some landscape or plantscape or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I see everything through a lens of nature, and it just comes out whether I want it to or not. And so, growing up, I had almost like a swamp behind our house.
This is in New Orleans or Louisiana?
This is on the Gulf Coast, Biloxi, Mississippi, where my parents moved and actually built a motel on the beach.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up in this park-like setting, and our house was on the same property, but behind it was this swamp. And so I had this really excitable landscape with lots of vines and God knows what, the
right.
mystery of things crawling and creeping and swimming and whatever. And then...
And that felt familiar to you. It was, because I go to that landscape and I'm afraid.
Oh, yeah.
I don't...
It's for me, it's an adventure.
Right.
It's always about what you're going to find.
Yeah.
And that's the same as the work. What am I going to find in this work?
Yeah.
And so I have a bit of the two things. I have this wildness, and then the other side of that is the Gulf, which all I had to do was turn around and I could see the Gulf in the distance. And at that point, at that place, it's very still, unless a hurricane's coming or some weather of some sort, and it's just flat, So I have this kind of minimal and maximal.
Right.
And
you lived right there at the border. One way was one, and one way the other way was the other.
Right.
That's wonderful.
That's
Right. So they.
Interesting.
I find that when I go to LA, my mother-in-law lives near the ocean there, and you turn one way and it's one of the biggest cities in the world, full of people and traffic and cars and things, and you turn the other way and it's just open ocean. Even though you're in an urban setting, it doesn't.
Right.
The same open ocean as if you're in a very rural place.
Right.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Border like that. And Linda, your work that we're looking at are photographs, and you were saying that a lot of it is photographs of things that are not necessarily in their prime. They're like flowers that are drying out, and that's an unusual way to photograph flowers.
I know.
But I find it compelling. Like at first, one of these Datura flowers, I thought it was maybe wire with paper stretched over it.
It has that texture. It was interesting. I grew up in Las Cruces, and my father was a physicist and a mountain climber. So we were always hiking, and so the desert has definitely been in my blood for a long time. But I remember I started out with a figure as being more about expressing the human condition or societal pressures and things like that. But then I became interested in nature kind of being a metaphor for the human condition. And I was telling my sister, I want to do a series on vulnerability. And she said, well, I have these dried daturas, and they're really delicate and they can shatter in a moment. And I saw them and I said, oh my God, they're so beautiful. They're so delicate. And she goes, well, do you know what daturas are, right? And I said, no. She goes, well, they're hallucinogenic and poisonous. And if you have too many, they can kill you. Yeah. And I said, oh my God, I love that. So beautiful, delicate, but dangerous and powerful.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go to a break. We'll be right back. My name's Matthew Chase Daniel. I'm talking with Paula Roland, Gina Telcocci, and Linda Ingraham about the Santa Fe studio tour which is June 21st, 22nd, 28th, and 29th. We'll be right back. You're back listening to Coffee and Culture. We're on Talk 1260 and 1037 KTRC, streaming at santafe.com. Past podcasts of the shows I do, you can find on any podcast platform, and it's listed as Coffee and Culture with Matthew Chase Daniel. And I am Matthew Chase Daniel. That's why it's called that. I'm here today with 3 of the 5 artists who are part of the group We 5, who are part of the Santa Fe Studio Tour. You can find out more about the Santa Fe Studio Tour online at sfestudioart.com. That's sfestudioart.com. And that's June 21st and 22nd, and then the following weekend, June 28th and 29th. So that's coming up soon.
And there's nearly 90 studios on there.
Wow. And they're all in Santa Fe City and the county a little bit, I think?
Yes.
Yeah. And are your studios near each other or not necessarily?
No.
We're kind of probably the nearest to one
and
another.
it's I think the reason we sort of also, our work has similarities, but also because we're sort of off the beaten track, not near other people.
Right.
And so we felt that it would be good to kind of promote.
Yeah.
Yeah, Diane and Robert are close to each other.
Right.
They're the farthest out, but they're pretty
that's right.
close.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a route you can take, and cleverly we have designed a card with a map with just our 5
So who's first?
studios.
I'm joking.
Actually, we don't. We're
Wherever you
using
want.
the numbers from the actual studio tour.
Right.
So they're all over the place.
Yeah.
But so obviously you can go and get the complete listing of nearly 90 studios on that website,
Right.
and it'll give you directions.
And the map they have on mobile devices is really good. Have you looked
Good.
at that?
No, I haven't looked at it yet.
Yeah, it's really detailed, and you can pull,
And you can get directions to each studio, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Diane Rolnick, she's been doing the work with flowers, like also not the same flowers as you, but not too far.
Yes.
In that they're, I don't know if it's her compost pile or
It's kind of, she has whenever she has a flower that's, I think that she's picked or something, she throws it on this pile underneath one of the trees. And it's so beautiful, and she photographs it. And she used to be a dancer also. So she loves to integrate dancers with these flowers, and she uses many layers. She's photo-based digital, and she uses, she makes all these layers, and then she excavates out kind of what she wants to say.
Huh.
So, and she uses nature in a way saying that we are all part of nature, and there's the cycles of nature also.
right. Yeah, there's a beauty in birth,
something,
and there's a beauty in the
decay,
waning and the decay,
Yes,
and giving back. And those dried flowers in those piles that she does, you're seeing both things that have decayed a lot and are the color is sort of leached out.
Yes.
And they're browns and blacks and grays. But then you see these remnants of flower petals that are pinks and yellows and very still holding on to that beauty.
It's very subtle. It's a very subtle weaving of her imagery, and it's very beautiful.
Yeah. And then Robert Wilhelm is making objects, sculptures, different scale, but a lot of them sort of small and intimate, made out of, of all the work, it's related, I think, more to Gina's than, in that they're these objects that almost look functional, but you don't know what the function is, like Gina's basketry work. There are these horns and flowers and baskets, and your work feels like it's almost made to carry something, but it's not. And you're playing with that functionality, non-functionality.
But he describes his work as though he's making these objects that, it's all about nature and our responsibility to nature. And he's creating these things that suggest how nature might evolve to protect itself, kind of imitating. I mean, to me, it reminded me of the opposite.
Protect itself from us.
Yeah, protect itself
Yeah,
from our
yeah.
onslaught as
Yes.
humans.
Like the thorns on a rose.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it reminded me of the opposite of biomimicry, where we're using nature to, be
Like nature's learning
Yes.
from humans and
our evil practices
Right.
adopting
Yeah.
to protect itself.
And he's saying that it may be, obviously he's just proposing this, but he's saying that, perhaps nature can evolve even imitating man's, and protect itself even using metal and things like that, from us destroying it.
Yeah,
That's
I
interesting.
think he combines the natural forms like a branch or other more sculpted natural material with metal and other man-made, human-made kind of objects to show this evolution that he says is happening.
Yeah.
So they're a little quirky. They're like Gina's quirky. And, not in a good way. To
Yes.
me, quirky is great.
yeah, you're all a little quirky.
We're all a little
well,
quirky.
aren't we all?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that talking about nature evolving to protect itself from us, I'm thinking of like this rash of orcas, killer whales, attacking boats. Have you heard about that?
Yes, I have.
Oh.
It's horrible.
They're going out and sinking
yeah.
boats,
Oh,
ramming
God.
boats and stuff,
Isn't
which
that
that's never been
interesting?
observed until recently.
Wow, they've had enough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
read that a
fighting
lot,
back.
actually.
Yeah, I also heard that like
Poor,
this was something about organic farming. It was some reason not to grow organic food, which I don't agree with, but it was that when you use different pesticides and herbicides and stuff to protect your plants from bugs and things, that they don't have as much defense themselves against those things. So when you grow organically, when you don't use anything, the plants build up more toxins in themselves to
Yeah.
protect themselves. And so there's some argument that non-organic food is healthier than organic food
Oh, that's so
because
interesting.
the plants aren't building up their own toxins that end up embedded in the food. I don't know if any of that's true.
interesting. Yeah.
And then what about the thing about is it mycelium?
Mycelium.
Where it's this connection, how everything under the earth, the trees are all connected and
Yeah,
everything is connected.
mushroom roots.
And and
Yeah.
fungi, obviously that could be turned against us.
Yeah, those are powerful things, and they're not quite plants, and they're not quite animals.
Yes.
Right.
They don't photosynthesize like plants,
Right.
but they digest things, and I don't know. They're interesting mushrooms.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a lot to think about. And I think that's part of what we do too, is we're pretty much thinking people who are also inspired, at least I know I am, by, things that I read and things that I'm interested in. And somehow, they just turn up in the work. And not necessarily in a planned way, at least for me.
Right.
They just kind of pop out. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think all artwork is a synthesis of all of our experiences.
Yeah.
yeah,
And as you say, sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's not conscious, but it's inevitably there. And as we change in our lives, our work changes and we explore different things and work it out that way.
That's so interesting you say that, because it's so true that sometimes it's very unconscious and you look and I can see sometimes like a bare tree, or I can see this little lonely seed pod or something like this. And I don't know why it speaks to me, but that sort of poignancy just totally speaks to me. And I'm like, I have to photograph that. I have to use that in my work in whatever way I'm going to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it's just keeping your eyes open
Yeah.
and looking, being open.
yeah. I know Diane photographs. She lives out a little bit from town with a lot of open area around her, and she photographs every day. She walks her dog.
She does her walk.
And
yeah.
she, has specific trees and other locations of things that she photographs in different weather and different times of year and so
Oh, that's
forth.
great. So she's observing the same
She's-
Yeah, and the
spot
cycles
over
of
and over
nature
as it
and
changes.
birth, growth. Yeah.
Right.
That's great. We got to go to another break. We'll be back in a minute. You're back with Coffee and Culture. My name's Matthew Chase Daniel. I'm talking with Paula Roland, Gina Telcocci, Linda Ingraham about the group We5, which includes them and Diane Rolnick and Robert Wilhelm. They'll all be showing as part of the Santa Fe Studio Tour, which is June 21st, 22nd, 28th, and 29th. And you can learn more about that at sfestudioart.com. sfestudioart.com. We're talking about Robert Wilhelm's work and that he works as an artist making these sculptures, but he also does product design and he's worked on films. He worked with Michael Moore on the film Roger and Me, which was a good film that I saw a long time ago. And Michael Moore's work is compelling and different. And but you're saying he's also making these pepper mills.
Yes, and they're very, Paula, you called it Memphis design.
Mm-hmm.
Very colorful, very stripes and polka dots and very kind of kooky designs.
But they're also functional.
They're functional
Yeah,
and they're very interesting.
Yeah.
So
And
he'll
Brent-
be showing that as well as his he's also a printmaker, I believe, and the sculpture.
I think he studied sculpture in school.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's sculpture and two-dimensional work.
From Michigan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Printmaking. Yes, printmaking.
Yeah. And you grew up in Las Cruces. I was just there last week for
Oh,
a while.
yeah?
Yeah. Having a show of photographs at the NMSU Art Museum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Oregon Mountains are so beautiful.
Yeah.
It was a funny little aside. I was driving through when I was driving to New York. I drove through the South and I drove through all that. And, they talked about the Smoky Mountains. And I was like, where are the mountains? I never
You were in the
saw any
Smoky Mountains.
And they
and
were
you-
just hills,
Yeah.
I'm
No.
used to
Yeah.
craggy mountains.
Yeah.
I know the Oregons always surprise me because they are so steep and
Yeah.
pinnacle-y and
Look like an organ pipe. Yeah.
right. And I've been to like Dripping Springs
Yes,
a long time ago, but not like further up. Have you hiked those
I
mountains?
actually hiked one of with my father and some other people. It's called the Needle. It's the highest one. But he was a mountain climber. We just had to scramble at the very end. So that
But
was...
you went all the
Oh,
way
yeah,
to the top.
all the
There's
way
a
up.
trail up to the top
Yes.
of that. Wow,
Yeah.
that must be intense.
It's interesting. And then I went to Boston on an exchange program in school. And then I saved up and went to Paris and studied in Paris for a year. And Diane is sort of the same thing. She ended up studying in Europe also, I think in Italy.
Uh-huh.
So kind of similar experiences
Right.
there.
And c'est pour ça que vous parlez français.
Oui, je parle français.
Ouais.
Je ne pas.
Moi aussi, j'ai étudié à Paris pendant les années 80.
Oui, 1981.
Uh-huh. 91. 81.
81.
81. Yeah, I was there 85, 86, 87. Yeah, Paris is a nice place.
Oh, God.
And then I moved here from there, which is a little different.
Which is a little different.
Yeah. And Gina, you've lived back and forth. So you were here when I first moved to Santa Fe. You were here and I got to know you a bit and your work. And then you moved to Oakland for 20 years or
20
something.
years, yeah.
And now you're back.
And now we're back.
for a few
yes.
years you've been here.
I think 4 years.
Yeah. Thanks for coming back.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad
Do you
to be
think you'll
here.
stay here?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I think I will too.
I mean, I feel at home here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice place.
Paula, what about you?
Yeah, I often think, well, maybe I should go somewhere else, but it's hard to find some place that ticks all the boxes that Santa Fe has, and the culture, the beauty, the art. So
Yeah, we're stuck.
It's a unique
are.
place because it's a smaller city, but it has so much culture.
Yeah.
And the nature is so beautiful.
Coming back too after having been away for 20 years, I mean, it's very different. A lot of things have changed, but one thing that has changed is that there's so much information more available to me. Like there are lectures every night of the week, practically on the history, archaeology, geology, everything like that. It's really great, and I guess I imagine that all of the new people moving here have demanded, to know more about it, which is good.
Yeah.
And that's one thing about the studio tour. You can learn so much more about an artist by, as Diane points out in her statement, than any other way. If you go to the studio, you see the materials, you see how they work.
Yeah.
And
you get to converse with them and find their
ask
process.
questions. And look at the process.
Yeah, sometimes I find the studio more interesting than the finished artwork.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that.
No,
and I don't mean that about your work.
It won't happen with our work because...
because there's all your stuff is there, all your compilations of junk that you've drawn.
Right, and the
True, and
brushes,
stuff you collect
the
and-
coffee can with some brushes, and what kind of coffee was that? There's all these little things that are indicators of your psyche and your process in your life.
It's interesting because going to of course some of them are these beautiful big studios, and some of them are a bedroom in a house.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess if you have to make art, you do it. You do it every way you can.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's constricting to have a great big studio because you then feel compelled to
Make great big work.
do great big things or something. Whereas if you're improvising space, it can be a little more organic about what you're driven to do.
Yeah.
Maybe I just say that because I'm working in a little space.
Yeah, and I like big studios because I do like to work large.
Oh God, me too. Yeah.
At least until my shoulder went out. But yeah.
Yeah, Paula, talk a little bit about your process because you sort of invented this way of doing encaustic painting. Yeah.
Somewhat, yeah. Encaustic painting's been around for many centuries, and but encaustic printmaking, which is something that I specialize in, I also paint, but it's a way of printing by using heat, because with wax, which encaustic is wax and pigment and a resin, you obviously have to heat the wax before you can move it and do anything with it. So I did develop some equipment that's run with light bulbs. I don't sell it anymore. I sold that part of my business to someone else who is still making the Roland hot box. And it's fueled by incandescent light bulbs that heat a metal plate on the surface, and once that metal heats up, you can take encaustic in any form. You could paint it on, but usually people take the solid chunk of encaustic color, like a, sort of a giant crayon,
Right.
and apply it to the surface.
To the metal.
To
plate.
the metal where it melts.
Melts as you rub it on there, it melts
And
in.
you can draw with it, and it will change, and it'll move, and you can take tools and move the paint around. And then when you're satisfied with that image, then you just lay the paper on top, press the back, and roll it up. Press the back with the gentle pressure of your hand.
Wow.
And pull it up. So you don't need a
Torch.
press,
Or
and you don't need a torch with that kind of encaustic. Although I love using my torch, and
you have time, because it stays at a more or less even temperature.
Yeah.
So you could work that wax on the plate really quickly or slowly.
Correct.
Is that true?
That's true. If you wait too long, it begins to sort of migrate. But then the migration allows other things to happen. It's very magical and alchemical. Like the colors, if it's 2 or 3 colors mixed together in the encaustic, that over time that you leave it on the plate, they'll start to separate. And so you get 2 or 3 colors for free, you know? And also the wax will migrate away from the pigment. In certain papers, that plain wax that's migrated away, certain papers will become translucent. In fact, most paper will. And certain ones will light up.
Well, we got to go to a break.
Okay.
We'll be right back talking about Paula Roland's The Roland Hot Box and everything you can do with Paula's Hot Box.
Including backlit pieces.
You're back with Coffee and Culture. Paula, you were talking about how when you lay the paper into the wax to get these prints, some of them are translucent and some aren't. It depends on the paper and the wax and how long you have it on there. But what else were you going to say about that?
I was going to say that I mostly use Asian paper, thin sumi type paper, but any kind of paper will work. And a couple of the papers that I use, like Reeves Lightweight, which is a Western paper, and Masa paper, which is a machine-made Japanese paper, they will, with plain wax, they will become very translucent, and I light those from behind, from the back.
Wow.
Mm.
So on my website, if you go to...
That's paularoland.com.
That's right, thank you.
PAULAROLAND.
One L, no W. And scroll down, you can see backlit works and all the different series. I work in series. And so, yes, I haven't done these in a while, but I have a big series of backlit works that really just totally change when you have either ambient light or directed light.
Yeah. Wax is kind of magical that way.
Yeah.
And Paula, I forgot, you're the one who inspired me to use wax, which I still use as a kind of finishing tool to this day. And I never had a Roland hot box, but I made a very crude imitation of one for many years.
Yes, many people have.
That's interesting because I've used wax to protect my photographs, but now I use resin, so I mount them onto panels and put resin on them. Because
is that like a polyester resin or
no, it's
epoxy?
Epoxy resin.
Uh-huh. So those are 2 parts. You mix them together, and you pour it, and it spreads.
It spreads, and you have to level it, and oh my God! And if things fall into it, it's a whole process. Wear a respirator, blah blah blah. Yeah. But isn't encaustic toxic also? Don't you have to be careful about that?
No, it's not toxic unless you overheat it. And so you have to follow precautions, and you have a surface thermometer that you can, like you get at the hardware store, that you can point at the plate and it'll tell you what the surface temperature is.
And if it starts smoking, you should...
Yeah, you don't want the smoke.
Okay.
Is it beeswax?
Yeah.
But so it's the pigments in the beeswax that if it burns and... No, it's the wax itself that you don't want to breathe.
If it reaches, I don't know, I forgot what.
It's not very high.
No, it's 250 degrees. It'll start to smoke. So, but you don't need to work anywhere near that,
Right.
200 degrees is like as high as you want to.
That's so interesting because that's one of the reasons I didn't use encaustic because I thought, I'm already doing resin and then it's, but I like.
Oh, I think it's a lot safer than
resin. I'm sure it is.
Well, both resin and wax over photographs can create such a beautiful tonality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where it turns it, because so much of the photography we see in the world these days is on our telephones.
I know, it's terrible.
Or on a computer screen or whatever. And there's something about like drawing and painting that's a physical,
It's a physical
thing that
yeah.
photography used to be,
But-
but it is less. But by using wax or resin, and you can move it back, even if you're working digitally, to make it really an object.
That's exactly
Right,
because
right.
you know what, I have a degree in painting, and that's how I started out, and so did Diane actually.
So
but,
did I.
Oh, and so did you.
Well,
That's
actually, I did too.
Oh my
So did
goodness!
I.
I wonder if Robert did also. I don't know.
Sculpture and printmaking.
But what's interesting is I was not attracted to photography because it was so sterile. And it was always behind glass, and it was just not. And what actually got me into it was when I came to UNM, and Betty Hahn, who did these non-silver works, where you could do a brush stroke of, gum bichromate or cyanotype, and you could put a nude or something in there, and it looked very painterly.
Right.
And that's how I got into it. And then when I finally got into the photography, I had to make little boxes or houses or shape frames because I wanted it to be more object oriented.
Right.
And now I do it with the resin and the panels.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also do
I also sand
vary
it.
the resin.
Yeah, I vary
So
because
it's
a
not
lot
all
of the
super
botanicals
shiny.
I really want to have a softer look, and that can look so shiny and kind of plasticky.
Yeah.
So I end up sanding it like 3 different grits, and then use a car polisher, so it has this beautiful hand rubbed luster.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks more like wax, actually.
Yes, it actually does.
Yeah, and just to go back to the danger of these materials, all materials have some drawbacks.
That's right, the oil paints. Yeah.
Right, and so you have to
Yeah, a
just
table saw.
yeah.
I just cut my finger almost off the other day.
Oh,
So
God, it looks
those materials
scary.
are really bad.
So using an exhaust fan takes care of that.
Ah, okay.
So that's why it's not toxic.
Okay.
And I'm sure you
I do. Well, I
Use
use
a-
a respirator.
use a
and,
respirator. And so
It's tricky to have good ventilation, but no dust.
Exactly.
They're
And
counter-
when you're resining, I don't
Right,
have
you can't
any-
open all the
no,
doors and
no
windows,
heater, no
right.
cooling, nothing. It has to be.
Right,
Because
but it
of-
dries pretty fast, right?
No, it's 8-hour cure.
Oh.
Ooh,
Yeah, so you can get a little. I once had a fly in it. I came in the next morning and there was a
that's interesting.
fly embedded in it.
that adds a dimension.
Yeah,
to it.
really.
Yeah, really.
You know what? It is a handmade object. It's not perfection. I mean, what do you expect from art?
Yeah.
And it's handmade.
Yeah, I like how the sanding and buffing, because that sort of grain on the surface, through it not being too shiny, catches light, different light, and illuminates it from within in a
Yeah.
certain way,
Yeah.
which is really nice. Is there more about the studio tour to talk about?
People, they think, oh God, it's Santa Fe is just full of artists, which it is. But it is such a different thing going, instead of going to a gallery, going to the studios.
Yeah.
Because you really do get to talk to the artist, you get to learn about their process and see where they work. And I'm so glad that we've moved it, because last year was October,
Uh-huh.
but we were conflicting with the El Dorado tour and I think the Abiquiu tour. So we moved it to June this year.
Right. And June, that week, second weekend, the 28th, 29th, is the grand opening of Site Santa Fe's
yeah.
They'll be-
International, which has like 90 different artists, some of whom are dead, so they won't be here. But
that's
It's
good.
the biennial.
or some
is
are
it a
fictional.
biennial?
Yeah, the biennial at
Yeah.
Site Santa Fe.
Some are fictional?
What's that?
Some are fictional?
Some are fictional. I mean, or they're like La Llorona, or
Oh,
I mean, there's
yes.
some characters who are part of it, and then there's artists, and then there's writers.
Oh, so it's multidisciplinary?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Alicia Inez Guzman and Lucy Lepard and Maymay Bursenberg are all contributing writing, and others who I'm not remembering.
Yeah, it's going to
But-
be great.
So there'll be a lot of people in town for that, so it's a good conjunction
Yeah,
there.
and you can find out more about the studio tour collective, as it's called, I think. And you can, there'll be maps in the newspapers. There'll be materials at the tourist offices and kiosks around town. There'll be a catalog this year that's good for the whole year. So if you miss some of these artists, which you will, because there are almost 90 of them, then you can use the book to help you pick out some of the artists and contact them by email or however.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or phone, maybe, I don't know. And go see them all year long. So.
Exactly, that's such a great idea. And we five have made our own little card, and we are going to try to put it out along various things too, so that you can, we were just trying to sort of promote within, because we're sort of off the beaten track.
Yeah, and if somebody is not in town and they want to get our card, they could write me at 1570 Pacheco Street, 87505, Studio D1, and I'll mail you a card.
And you all have very good websites because they're very clear and they're all your names. So Paula Roland's website is paularoland.com. Gina Telcocci's website is ginatelcocci.com. Telcocci is spelled like it sounds, Telcocci, and Gina is Gina. Linda's Ingram's website, is
Not Laura Ingram.
is lindaingram.com, and that's spelled
Ingraham, Ingraham, like Graham with N in front of.
And Diane Rolnick is dianerolnick.com. And Robert Wilhelm is the outlier. He is not robertwilhelm.com. He is rawilhelm.com. The Santa Fe Studio Tour is at sfestudioart.com, June 21st, 22nd, 28th, 29th. And it's open till 4 or 5 p.m.
11 to 5.
11 to 5. You can find that all on the website. Oh, and we're over time.
And
Bye.
yes, work is for sale.
Yeah, works for sale. And thank you all for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thanks,
Matthew.